Hello everyone, it's me Uncle John. Today I am going to read S33235 5 Canterbury Tales by Geoffrey Chaucer. Part 2, Chapter 2, The Knight's Tale. In the end, the knight spoke first. "I'm not very good at this," he said, "but I have a wonderful old story to tell. It's all about love and war between men and women, two friends and different countries, but it's very long. So I am going to tell you only the most important things. I'm not going to take a lot of time answering all those little questions. What clothes did they wear? What did they eat? How did they fight? And was the weather good or bad? But let's begin. Are you all ready?" We all said yes at once, and he began to tell his story happily. Long ago in Greece, Duke Theseus fought to make Athens bigger. For many years, he made war with different people. One of these wars was with the Amazons. These women were very good fighters and not afraid of Theseus or the people of Athens. When Theseus won the war, he married the Amazon queen, Hippolyta. After that, he wanted to take his wife and her sister, Emily, to Athens. On the road, they came to the city of Thebes. There, they saw lots of women with their heads in their hands. "Why are you crying?" asked Theseus. "Our city fought a war with Creon," the woman told him. "He took the city. Now he is king of Thebes. And we can't bury the dead bodies of our husbands, fathers, and sons because they were Creon's enemies." Then Theseus told his wife and her sister, "You must go to Athens without me. I must fight Creon before I come home." So Hippolyta and Emily went to Athens, and Duke Theseus fought Creon. In the end, Theseus killed him. When he was dead, the women of Thebes could bury their men. In the war, Theseus' men hurt two of Creon's knights. Later, they brought these two men to the duke. Their names were Archide and Palamon. They were cousins and good friends. Because they were good fighters, the duke didn't kill them. "You're coming with me to Athens," he said. "There you must live in prison. And in the end, you must die in prison too, because you are friends of King Creon, and he was my enemy." So Archide and Palamon went with Theseus to Athens, and for many months they lived in a prison next to the duke's castle. One day, when Palamon sat by the window, he saw beautiful Emily in the castle garden. He fell in love with her at once and cried, "Oh hell, I'm hurt!" "Are you ill?" Palamon asked Archide from his bed. "No, I'm not. But come and look through the window," answered Palamon. Archide looked through the window. When he saw Emily, he fell in love with her too. Emily called Hippolyta from the castle. "Come here, I need you." "I'm coming, sister," answered Emily, and she went at once. "What a beautiful girl!" cried Archide. "She is Queen Hippolyta's sister Emily, and I love her." "You can't love her," said Palamon angrily. "I saw her and fell in love with her first, so I am her lover, not you." "Cousin," answered Archide, "Emily doesn't know us, and we are never going to meet her, so I can love her too, I think, and you can't stop me." The two cousins, once the best of friends, now became the worst of enemies. Sometime later, Duke Perotheus visited Athens. He was Theseus's friend and Archide's friend too. "Theseus," said Perotheus when they met, Can Archite go back to Thebes with me? Of course, answered Theseus, but he must never come back to Athens, or I'm gonna kill him. Archite left the prison and Athens very sadly. He was very angry about Palamon. I am never going to see Emily again, but Palamon is going to see her from his prison window every day. Back in Thebes, Archite was ill for a long time, with love for Emily. When after many months he was well again and could leave his bed, his face was thinner and he had a beard. I am very different to look at, he thought. No one is going to know me in Athens now. So he changed his name to Philostrate, changed his clothes, and went back to Athens. There he went at once to Theseus' castle, and soon became the duke's good friend. All this time Palamon stayed in prison and watched Emily through his window every day. But one night, soon after Archite was back in Athens, Palamon climbed out of the prison window and ran to a forest near the castle. The next day Archite went for a walk in the forest. He saw nobody near him, so he spoke freely, but behind the tree the Palamon listened carefully. Every day Palamon watches Emily far away through his prison window, began Archite. And some months ago I too nearly died of love for her, but now I can meet her and speak with her in the castle when I want. These days I have a new beard, and I am thinner than I was, so no one here knows me. That's good, because now I can be Philostrate and Duke Decius's good friend. And before I was only his enemy, Archite. Suddenly Palamon came up from behind his trees. Fight me, Archite, you dog, he cried angrily, and the two cousins fought. Just then Duke Theseus arrived with some knights. Hippolyta and Emily came after them. What's all this noise? Philostrate, my friend, why are you fighting? Palamon told the Duke everything. So you are my old enemy, Archite, said Theseus angrily. Archite, Palamon, the two of you must die for this. But Emily and Hippolyta cried, Please don't kill them. So the Duke said to the cousin, Very well, I'm not gonna kill you. You are free to leave Athens now, but you must come back in a year's time, Archite. Bring with you 100 knights, and Palamon, you bring 100 knights too. There is going to be a big fight between you, and the winner can marry Emily. So Archite and Palamon promised to come back with their knights and left Athens. Theseus began to make everything in the city ready for the big fight. Soon there were new buildings everywhere, and the people of Athens felt excited. We're going to have a good time next year, they thought, with lots to eat and lots of drinking and singing, and all because Archite and Palamon and their knights are coming. It's so wonderful. After a year, Archite and Palamon came back to Athens with their best knight. They were ready to fight for Emily. The night before the fight, Palamon asked Venus for help. Goddess of love, help me to marry Emily, he said. At the same time, Emily asked Diana for help. Goddess of women without husbands, she said. I don't want to marry. So stop this fight between Archite and Palamon, but perhaps you cannot do that. So then help me to marry well. Which of these two knights loves me more? I want him for my husband. That evening, Archite asked Mars for help, god of war. Help me to win the fight, he said. In Olympus, the home of the gods, Diana spoke angrily with Venus and Mars. What can we do? She said. Palamon, Emily, and Archite all want different things. They can't all be happy in the end. The answer's easy, said the old god. Saturn, Palamon can win Emily, and Archite can win the fight. Listen to me. What's going to happen tomorrow is this. Back in Athens, it was the day of the big fight. Before things began, Duke Theseus spoke to Archite, Palamon, and all their knights. When a knight is hurt, he said to them, he must leave the fight. Do you understand? Yes, said Archite and Palamon. Then the fight began. After some time, Palamon was badly hurt, and his men took him away.
Archite was happy when he saw Parliament go. He stayed on his horse, put his hands over his head, and cried to the people of Athens, "I am the winner." The people of the city cried back excited, "Archite is the winner, Archite is the winner." When Archite's horse heard all this noise, it became afraid. Suddenly it stood up on its back legs. Archite fell from its back and was badly hurt. Oh, doctors ran to him, but they couldn't help him, and so he died in the end. Palamon married Emily, and the two of them buried Archite very sadly. Duke Theseus was excited about the wedding between Palamon and Emily. "This is an important day for Athens and Thebes," he said on their wedding day. Palamon loved Emily, and she loved him, and they were husband and wife for many long and happy years. Chapter 3, The Wife of Bathy's Tale. Now it was time for the wife of Bathy's story, but before she began, she told us all about her 5 past husbands. "My ritual husbands were the best," she said. "They did everything for me. Women are more important than husbands, after all." Some pilgrims laughed openly when they heard about all her different past lovers, young and old. But when she began her story, we all listened interestedly. I'm sorry. Ach. In King Arthur's time, the king and his knights lived in the castle of Camelot. One of Arthur's knights, Tarquin, loved Lucretia, a beautiful young woman with long black hair. But she didn't love him. One day she sat under a tree by the river, when suddenly Tarquin rode his horse out of the forest and took her in his arms. "Help!" cried Lucretia, but Tarquin carried her away quickly on his horse to an old house on a hill far from Camelot. There he put her in a dark room and closed the door behind her. At once King Arthur called his knights to him. "Find Tarquin and Lucretia," he said, "and bring them to me." They soon brought Tarquin and Lucretia to the king. He was angry with Tarquin. "When a knight from Camelot treats a woman badly, he must die," said Arthur. But Queen Guinevere felt sorry for Tarquin, so she asked her husband, "Can I give a different punishment to him?" "Of course," said the king. Then she said to Tarquin, "Tell me the answer to this important question. What do women want most of all?" Tarquin didn't know, so he said nothing. Then the queen said, "Tarquin, you can leave Camelot now, but you must come back in a year with a good answer to my question, or you die." So Tarquin went from village to village and town to town, and always he asked different women the Guinevere's question. In one village they answered, "We want money." In the next village they said, "We want to be happy." In one town they told Tarquin, "We want to hear nice things from our lovers." Days became weeks and weeks became months. Soon it was time for Tarquin to go back to Camelot. He felt bad because he didn't have a good answer to the Guinevere's questions. On the road to Camelot, Tarquin rode his horse through a forest. It was dark and not easy to see there. After some time, he got off his horse and began to walk. Just then he saw 24 beautiful young women in front of him. They were all in green dresses, and they sang beautifully, laughed, and moved in and out of the trees. But when Tarquin came near, they suddenly left, and the only thing there in front of him was an ugly old woman. Tarquin told this story to her and asked her Guinevere's question. "I can tell you the answer," she said, "but first you must promise me something." "What?" asked Tarquin. "You must pay me back later for my help." "Of course, old woman," laughed Tarquin. In Camelot, Tarquin went at once to the queen. "What do women want most of all?" asked Guinevere. "To rule their husbands," answered Tarquin. Guinevere asked the women in the room, "Is that right?" Yes, they all said. Tarquin, you are a free man, said Guinevere. Just then the ugly old woman from the forest came into the room. Wait, she cried, that young man's answer came from me. It's true, said Tarquin, and now you must pay me back, said the old woman. How much money do you want? Asked Tarquin. I don't want money, she said. You must marry me. Oh, so Tarquin married the old woman that afternoon, that night. Before they went to bed, his new wife was sad. What's the matter, husband? She asked. Why don't you look at me? Wife, he said, I feel ill when I see your face. But my ugly face is a good thing, she answered. No man is going to want to take me to bed. And so I'm always going to be faithful to you. What do you want? A quiet, faithful, but ugly wife? What a beautiful but not faithful wife? I don't know, said Tarquin. You choose for me. When she heard this, the old woman felt happy. She now ruled her husband. Kiss me, she said. I am going to be your faithful and beautiful wife. So Tarquin kissed the ugly old woman, and at once she became young and beautiful. And after that, Tarquin lived very happily with his beautiful, faithful wife for many years. What an end. Chapter 4. The Clerk of Oxford's Tale. The quiet clerk looked sad when the landlord said to him, Forget your books and your long face and tell us a story. Remember, lots of interesting things must happen in it. And please make it easy for us to understand. Very well, answered the poor clerk. It's an old Italian story, and with God's help, we can all learn something from it about strong husbands and faithful wives. Then he began. King Walter ruled Saluzo in Italy. His people loved him, but he was sad because he had no wife and no son. I can only be with I can only be happy with an obedient wife, he said. But it wasn't easy to find an obedient woman in Saluzo. From time to time, King Walter went into town in dirty old clothes. He liked visiting his people when they didn't recognize him. One day, in his old clothes, Walter met a poor man, Janicula, and his beautiful daughter, Griselda. Every day, Griselda brought water home for her father, and Walter watched her at work. She was a good and obedient daughter. She is the perfect wife for me, he decided. So Walter, in his old clothes, visited Janicula. Can I marry your daughter? He asked. Of course, answered Janicula. Then Walter spoke to Griselda. I want to marry you, he said. I asked your father, and he said, but before we marry, promise me something. What? Asked Griselda. When we are husband and wife, you must always be obedient. Sometimes it's going to hurt you, but you never question me. I promise, said Griselda. Then Walter said to Griselda, now I can tell you my secret. I am King Walter. After the wedding, Griselda became famous in Saluso. What a good, beautiful woman, people said, and what an obedient wife. Soon she had a daughter. When the child was very little, the king decided to test his wife. Our daughter cannot stay with us, he said. She must go and live in a house far away. Griselda remembered her promise before the wedding. Of course, she said. So Walter took their young daughter to a good family in a house far away and left her there. After 2 years, Griselda had a son. Everyone in Saluso was happy. But when the boy was 2 years old, Walter tested his wife again. Our son cannot stay with us, he said. He must go and live in a house far away. Again, Griselda remembered her promise before the wedding. Of course, she said. So Walter went back to the family in the house far away and left the young son there with their daughter. When their daughter was 16 years old and their son 14, the king decided to test Griselda one more time. He sat down at his writing table and wrote a false letter. It said, "To King Walter of Saluzo, you can leave your first wife, Griselda, and marry again, this time to a woman from a good family, your friend, Pope Urban VI." Walter took the false letter to Griselda and said, "This is from the Pope. Now I can leave you and marry a rich young wife." Griselda felt very sad, but she remembered her promise. "Of course," she said, "I can go back to live with my father." Then the king brought his son and his daughter back home in rich clothes. He didn't tell Griselda their true names. After 12 years away, she didn't recognize them. "This is my new wife and her young brother," said Walter. Then he asked Griselda, "Before you leave, can you help my new wife into her wedding dress?" "Of course," she said, and she went to her daughter's room and helped the young girl into the beautiful dress. After that, Griselda took off her rich queen's clothes, put on a poor woman's dress, and went back to her father's house. "What a perfect wife," she said, Walter. At once, he took his children to Janicula's house. There he spoke to his wife. "Griselda," he said, "the Pope's letter was false. There was no wedding today. I have no new wife. This is your daughter, Vera, and this is your son, Fidelio. I took them from you many years ago, but now they are back with us again." "Can this be true?" Griselda cried, with a smile on her face. "Yes, mother, it's us," said Vera and Fidelio. At once Griselda took her two children in her arms. All three of them cried happily. Then they went back home with Walter. After that, the king stopped testing his wife, and they and their children lived happily in Saluzo for many years. Chapter 5. The Merchant's Tale. After the clock finished, the merchant said, "I married my wife 2 weeks ago, and she's not an obedient Griselda. She's a very bad young woman. She's always angry with me, and she never stops talking. I'm tired of it. For me, all wives are only punishments for their husband." He said no more about his wife after that, but began his story. January was a ritual night. He lived in the town of Pavia in the north of Italy. When he was younger, he had a good time. Now he was 60. He wanted to marry a young woman from his hometown and have a son. "My wife can help me when I'm very old and ill, and my son can have my house and everything in it when I die," he thought. In the end, January decided to marry a very young woman. Her name was May. Before the wedding, he asked his friends, "Is she right for me?" Most said, "She's perfect." But his best friend Justinius said, "It isn't good for an old man to marry a young girl. You're going to have problems." January didn't listen and married May. After the wedding dinner, he told his friends, "Go now, I want to be alone with my young wife." They left at once, and January and May went to bed. Damien was a young servant in January's house. He fell in love with May when he first saw her. He soon became ill with this love, but told his secret to nobody. "What's the matter with Damien?" January said to May. "Wife, go and look after him." So May went and sat by Damien's bed. Damien soon began to feel better. Once, when they were alone, he gave May a short letter. She read it. "May, I love you a lot, your servant Damien." Then May looked up at Damien. "I love you too," she said. Damien soon got out of bed after that. Sometime later, January suddenly became blind. He was now very jealous of May. "Where are you? Stay next to me. Give me your hand," he said. "You must look after me." It wasn't easy for May. She wanted to be with Damien, but all the time her jealous old husband stopped her. One morning at breakfast, Damien quietly gave May a long letter. January was there, but he couldn't see a thing. May said nothing, but she read Damien's letter at once. It said, "May, let's meet in the garden. I can go there before you. Climb up into the pear tree and wait for you. When you and January arrive, climb up into the tree and we can kiss there, Damien." "Shall we go for a walk in the garden?" May asked January after breakfast. "Yes," he answered. He took May's hand blindly and walked with her into the garden. At the same time, in the country of the dead, the god Pluto, king of uh, Hades, spoke to his wife, Queen Proserpina. "I'm angry with May," said Pluto. "She's not faithful to January. Poor blind January. I'm going to help him. He's going to see again. That's going to stop Mary." "I'm not sorry for January," said Proserpina. "He's a foolish old man. He married a young girl for her face and body and didn't see any problem in that. I'm going to help May. When January sees his young wife in the tree with Damien, she's going to be ready with a quick answer for her husband." Back in Italy, May and January sat under the pear tree in the garden. Damien waited up in the tree. "Husband, are you hungry?" asked May. "Yes," said January. "Would you like a nice pear from the tree?" asked May. "Yes." So May climbed up into the tree. Quietly, Damien began kissing and hugging her. Just then, January could suddenly see again. He looked up and saw Damien and May. "What are you doing?" he said. "I can see you. You are hugging and kissing Damien," cried January angrily. "What are you talking about?" said May. "Yesterday, an old woman told me, 'Fight with the man in a pear tree, and your blind husband is going to see again.' Damien fought with me in the tree because I asked him, and you can see again, so it worked. So don't be angry at me. Say thank you." "Perhaps you're right," said January. "I can see now because you fought with Damien in the pear tree. Thank you, wife, for that." May climbed quickly down from the tree. She smiled up at Damien, hugged January, and took a foolish old man back into the house. Chapter 6. The Franklin's Tale. Before the Franklin began his story, he said, "I never learned much from the books because I didn't go to a good school. My story is about a husband and wife too. But for me, when a man and a woman marry, the two of them must rule in their home differently, of course, for it to be a happy one." And with that, he began. Alberregus was a good rich knight. He lived in a castle on a black hill near the sea in Brittany in France. One day he decided to marry. He chose for his wife a beautiful young woman, Dorigan. Before the wedding, he said to her, "When we are husband and wife, I'm always going to think well of you, and I'm never going to be angry when you say or do foolish things. Can you promise me this too?" "Of course," said Dorigan, and she promised. Soon after the wedding, the Alvaregus went away to a different country. Dorigan felt lonely. She often went down to watch the sea. It hit the black rocks for hours. Dorigan watched it sadly and waited for her husband to come home. A rich man, Aurelius, lived near Alvaregus's castle. Day after day, he saw Dorigan from his window, and he fell in love with her. He began to go for walks by the sea. One day he spoke to Dorigan. "Would you like to come to my castle for dinner?" "I'm sorry," said the faithful Dorigan. "I can't. I'm waiting for my husband." Day after day, Dorigan watched the sea. Day after day, Aurelius came and spoke to her. "Would you like a drink? Would you like to meet my friends?" Always Dorigan's answer was no, But one morning in May, Aurelius said, Dorigan, would you like to come on a picnic? And this time Dorigan said yes. Aurelius ran home at once. He put lots of good things to eat in a picnic box, took it back to Dorigan, and opened it. He gave a red apple to Dorigan. She sat on a little rock near him and ate it. Soon Aurelius said, Dorigan, I love you. Your husband is away. You can come to my castle in secret. I want you. No, she said. Dorigan, think again. You're alone. Come to my castle. I need you. Dorigan left. Aurelius, I promise you something. First, take away all the rocks from the sea near Brittany. Then you and I can meet in your castle, she joked. After the picnic, Aurelius went home to his castle, and Dorigan stayed and watched the sea. One day, Alvaragus came home after many months. He and Dorigan hugged and kissed when they met. I'm happy to be back, he said. I'm happy to have you here again, said Dorigan. But on that day, at the same time, Aurelius met a magician. He told the man about Dorigan's promise. For 1,000 pounds, I can take away all the rocks from the sea near Brittany, the magician said. Do it and I can give you the money the day after tomorrow, said Aurelius. Early the next morning, the rocks weren't there. Aurelius came at once to see Dorigan. Remember your promise, I'm waiting for you tonight, he said. Then he went back to his castle. Dorigan remembered a foolish joke and felt sad. What's the matter? Asked Alvaragus at breakfast. Dorigan told him all about the picnic and a foolish promise. Alvaragus said, Dorigan, I'm sorry, it was a joke, I know, but a promise is a promise. It's gonna hurt me a lot, but there are no rocks in the sea today, so you must go to Aurelius tonight. Aurelius smiled when he opened his door to Dorigan that night, but then he saw her sad face. What did your husband say? When Dorigan told him, Aurelius said, your husband is a very good man, and I feel very bad. A joke is a joke after all. Look, I'm going to bed, and you must go back to Alvaragus. So Dorigan went home to her husband. The next day, magician visited Aurelius. Where is my money? And what happened with Dorigan? Aurelius told him about the night before. You poor man, said the magician. After all that, you didn't get the girl? Well, Alvaragus is a good husband. Dorigan is a good wife. And I'm a good magician. So let's forget the 1,000 pounds. Thank you very much, my friend, said Aurelius. In the end, after all these interesting stories and more, we pilgrims arrived in Canterbury. There we visited St. Thomas's tomb and said our thank yous to God. But things didn't finish there because we told lots of more stories on the road back from Canterbury too. The end.